always as timely as on as timely a basis as we'd like, but when we start facing down potential catastrophe, humanity adapts, and I think we will this time as well.
Do you feel that you are making headway with President Hu on this front?
I think that China has an enormous interest in solving this problem. If you talk to Chinese leaders, I think they will acknowledge immediately that if over 1 billion Chinese citizens have the same living patterns as Australians and Americans do right now, then all of us are in for a very miserable time. The planet just can't sustain it. So they understand that they've got to make a decision about a new model that is more sustainable, that allows them to pursue the economic growth that they're pursuing, while at the same time dealing with these environmental consequences. So I think they understand it intellectually. Right now, though, their understandable impulse is to say, well, let's let the developed countries, the Australias and the Americas, deal with this problem first, and we'll get to it when we've caught up a little bit in terms of our standard of living. The point we've tried to make is we can't allow China to wait. We have to take responsibility and do what needs to be done, but if emerging countries, not just China, but also India, Brazil, and others, are pursuing a path in which they replace us as the largest carbon emitters, that's not a sustainable, practical approach. So we're going to have everybody moving on the same track at the same time.
Are you as wedded are you as convinced that a carbon trading scheme is the best way to go, the best way to get emissions down, as Kevin Rudd is?
I think that I am absolutely convinced you have to put a price on carbon of some sort. So there are a number of ways of doing that. You could do a carbon tax, you can do a cap and trade system, which is what originally I had suggested, very similar to the program that Kevin Rudd has proposed. But the key is to change incentives for the marketplace, where we are actually pricing these pollutants that are going into our atmosphere. If a price is placed on them, if industry has to take them into account, then we can count on the marketplace responding effectively. If it's free to pollute, then you're never going to have companies making all the myriad decisions that are required in order for the entire system to move in a better direction. And it's never sufficient for a command and control system in which government is trying to chase down every single polluter. What you have to do is have a market mechanism to make it work more efficiently.
To come back to China, America has been the world's most powerful nation for a century, but given the projections that China is well on the way to becoming the world's biggest economy, with all that potentially delivers, including greater political muscle, how hard is it going to be for Americans to adjust in a mature way to the increasing prospect that you can't be number one forever?
I don't think about this as a zero-sum game. I actually think that America can be number one for a very, very long time, but we think that there can be a whole host of countries that are prospering and doing well. Here's one way to think about it. The Chinese standard of living and industrial output per capita is about where the United States was back in 1910. Yeah. I mean, they've got a lot of catching up to do.
They do.
It is in our interests, both of our countries' interests, for China to be successful, for China to be prosperous, because that means they're more likely to be stable. That means they're more likely to be able to deal with issues like the energy efficiency of their industries and reduce pollution. And so we're not interested in constraining China. We want China to do well. The only thing we want to make sure of is that a country like China, as it is growing, and inevitably will end up being the largest economy just because of the enormous size of their population, that they are also taking their international responsibilities seriously, and that they recognize that with great power comes great responsibility.
In your landmark speech in 2004, you said America's genius was its faith in simple dreams. As you look across the landscape of America's working families today, for many of them, there's not a lot to dream about. Still nearly 10% unemployment, a lot of underemployment, a big army of working poor. With the health bill behind you now, is that your biggest challenge for the rest of this term?
Making sure that not only we're dealing with the short-term problems in the economy that come out of the financial crisis, but laying the foundation for long-term economic growth is absolutely our biggest challenge. I'm optimistic that we can do it, but there are some legs to the stool that have to be put in place. Having a reformed healthcare system was one of them. Having a strong financial regulatory system so that we never have the kind of financial crisis on Wall Street that we saw again. That's a second component. A third component is what we just talked about with respect to energy. Having a shift from the old energy models to a new energy model that's more efficient and more self-sustaining. That's a third leg. Improving our education system, which historically has always been the driver of extraordinary economic growth. But frankly, if you compare the per capita performance of kids in Singapore at this point to kids in the United States when it comes to things like math and science, we haven't been doing as well as we have historically. So those are the kinds of big structural shifts that we're going to have to make. We're not going to make them all overnight, but one of the things that I'm pleased about is that given the history of financial crises, we have actually managed this and rebounded much more quickly than I think anybody anticipated, and we're in a strong position with strong growth rates to move in a very positive direction, but we have to tend to these long-term problems.
At the same time as these families are struggling, the Wall Street syndrome lives on, if I could put it that way. Bankers back feeding at the trough while much of the rest of America pays. Do you feel strong enough, in a strong enough position, a strong enough place, do you have, now that you have that momentum back, to withstand the power of the Wall Street lobby and seriously regulate the financial system the way you want to? I know what your plans are, but that lobby is a very powerful, very resistant lobby.
I think we're going to get this done. And the reason is because the American people understand that what happened in 2008 cannot be repeated. And so lobbies operate well under the cover of darkness. When you have the disinfectant of sunlight on the process and what it is that we're trying to push for, then I think we're going to get a very strong financial regulatory reform bill, and as part of the G20, we'll be coordinating with Australia and other countries to make sure that these reforms are not just taking place on Wall Street, but they're taking place in London, they're taking place in Hong Kong, all across, all around the world. We've got to recognize that capitalism is absolutely the best system for producing wealth, but there's got to be a regulatory framework put in place to make sure that excessive risks don't end up bringing the entire system down.
So why are you so confident that you will be able to get your regulatory system through Congress?
I'm always confident.
Well, it worked on health eventually. On your path to the White House, you inspired great hope around the world, not just in America, but around much of the rest of the world. How will you measure the worth of your presidency?
You know, looking back on my presidency, whether it's one term or two, I can say that I was able to wind down the war in Iraq successfully. I was able to stabilize Afghanistan in a way that keeps the American people safe. That we were able to create an economy that works for all Americans and not just some Americans. And that we've provided a little more security with respect to having a healthcare system that works. I think those would be goals that I came into office espousing, and being able to deliver on my promises, I think, is the best thing that a politician can do.
And last question, what does it mean to you to be seen as a transformational president?
I don't tend to think of myself in those terms. What I tend to think about is the job in front of me, what I need to do today, tomorrow, the next day. I assume that I'll a lot of leisurely time after the presidency to look back and see what kind of impact I had.
Barack Obama, thanks very much for taking this opportunity to talk with us.
Thank you.